My name is Fiona Capdevila, and the research paper I'm presenting today is titled Aesthetics of Coherence, Rethinking Dress from Eco-Feminisms and Ethics of Care. So I am focused on widening the narratives out of the scope of fashion and also out of the sustainable fashion, and promoting imaginaries around alternative dress practices. In this paper, I have been exploring from an interdisciplinary approach how the perspectives of ecofeminisms and ethics of care can affect the understanding of what I call the clothed body and the clothed self. So I must warn that this is an ongoing research in which most of the ideas I am working in my PhD thesis are still dancing around to find their place. Therefore, I welcome any feedback and comments. I want to thank also my director, Jessica Jacques, and my professors, Gerard Vilà and Tania Costa. So what's the context? I want to explain briefly. Sorry, okay. The context that has led me here. I was an independent designer willing to change the fashion system for better. So since 2002, I had my own atelier where I designed and made artisanal garments under my brand Del Través in Barcelona, using discarded textiles as my main material. There was still no concept for what I was doing, so I called it textile alchemy. Along 15 years, I pushed the change, learned a lot, and met amazing people and made incredible projects, including an art research project on the seamstresses who worked in the haute couture ateliers in Barcelona until 1970 as the Balenciaga one. But I also reached a dead point and experienced the painful limits of the market, which I could not overcome. So I decided to focus on study and research. I am very concerned about all the entrepreneurs who develop groundbreaking projects in terms of social and ecological consciousness and come out to a global arena believing it's a fair one, as I did. Yesterday, I had the pleasure to hear Kate Fletcher and Matilda Tam, and somehow they inspired this part of my research, because I also think that the last 2 decades have been really busy in terms of activism, really lots of thousands of people committed on changing the state of the art. But nevertheless, the big problems are growing, not decreasing. So this question was kind of a starting detonator, so to speak. I felt interjected with it, and here I try to explain why I think that despite all the good intentions, it is not possible to change the DNA fashion system in a deep level. I will be using the Ethics of Care by Virginia Hell and ecofeminism theory as analytic tools and taking them to the domain of aesthetics, developing several concepts in an exercise of what Mieke Val calls traveling concepts. This is stretching concepts between diverse disciplines to make them productive. Okay, sorry, I'm a little bit late. Okay, so when fashion has been evolving through modernity with little interest in the ethics it involves, leading to grotesque and tragic disasters as the enslavement of millions for the colonial plantations, among many, many more. On the other hand, sustainability narratives adopt a very technical and normative tone. So how can we deal with ethics and aesthetics simultaneously? When we talk of sustainable fashion, we assume fashion is somehow the opposite, although the known does not reflect it. Fashion evolves in a supposed morally and ecologically neutral domain, while there are enough studies to prove the contrary. Thus, inspired by Yayo Herrero, who renames liberal capitalism as the biocide system, I decided to charge the fashion system with some responsibilities on human and non-human lives, adjusting the use of language. So I will use the concept biocide fashion for those structures that maintain biocide practices in the way they design, produce, and sell clothes. The lack of legal regulations for transnational companies relies in consequence on the individual moralities of their rulers. Can the current moral context contain or reshape the fashion system? Or if not, can the rational argumentations of the fair trade-minded entrepreneurs and academics influence on global company rulers who intend to take benefit from the lack of regulation? It relies on their individual moralities and or on the power they might have within these dinosaur structures, in words of Vandana Shiva. So I argue that in an unregulated global market, we enter in the moral sphere, as we must rely on goodwill of individuals who really want to push forward changes. Where from and towards what moral domains. Virginia held ethics of care, personal, political, and global, distinguishes two models of moral individuals: the caring person versus the Kantian individual. I talk much more about this in my paper, but I cannot be so exhaustive here. If feminist moral theory is increasingly recognized as a distinct and interesting alternative approach to moral issues regarding on health, so also the increasing corpus of creative practices based on caring actions, most of them performed by women, may be an indicator of a paradigm shift from the Kantian moral theory based on the rational decisions of agents assumed to be independent, autonomous individuals, towards feminist ethics, characterized for being a relational model of moral agency, according to Jen Keller, in which persons are deeply affected, involved in, and embedded in multiple contexts of lineage. From an eco-feminist perspective, it's not possible to act truly from an ethics of care while at the same time acting from Kantian ethics. Therefore, efforts to transform dinosaur structures are quite useless without the power to limit their biocide actions, since the self-interested morality has little interest in limiting its self-interested motivations, like a dog that beats its own tail. Bodies, territories, and territories' bodies are understood as an indissoluble parcel of intertwined existence by eco-feminist thinkers. I have a long list in the paper, based on a continuous exchange of material from the territories to the bodies and back to the territories. I call this process somatization of materials, which is intended to complement the vulnerable, eco-dependent and interdependent human bodies, affording them enhanced capabilities and skills that amplify their agency within environments. The lifelong relationship between bodies and territories tends to develop a sense of place, according to Carlson, and or a sense of belonging, according to Bartolome. In the image, we can see Sonia Guajajara, who recently was elected as deputy for the new government in Brazil. Also, I found like this, the will to incorporate the words land back in the skill by this woman. And also we can see Regina José Galindo with her performance Terra, in which she stands while a machine takes all the soil around her, in a very powerful image. So the clothed body. There is a gap on acknowledging the omnipresence of clothes when talking of bodies in feminist and eco-feminist literature. Knowledge is not an abstract instance to feminist epistemologies. Instead, it's seen as a cognitive experience situated in specific contexts, meaning bodies, places, and circumstances. The omnipresence of clothes is unavoidable as physical objects complementing the vulnerable body and generating multiple affordances to the self, according to Bertinetto. This would imply the existence of several layers of the being that are affected by the omnipresence of the clothed body. Thus, we could say that the self exists in a clothed body. So, clothing to me is an interface. And the Cambridge Dictionary defines interface as a situation, way, or place where two things come together and affect each other. And this is accurate when talking of apparel, because when a garment is being worn, at least two things come together through it, the body and the environment. So I started to see clothing as a multidirectional interface connecting bodies to several dimensions of reality, mediating between the body and the environments, the closer ones and the global issues. In the image, you can see Jordi Masvalado, a dancer who defines himself as ecological dancer, and he made this garment made from some plants he gathered for a special performance this summer. So, which are the ways in which bodies can affect environments? Through dress. In the paper, I explore the aesthetical, the ecological, and the ethical imprints through some examples. The social interaction is grounded on the aesthetical presentation of the clothed body, producing strong first impressions that organize human hierarchies and identities, deeply studied by sociology of fashion. Thanks to apparel, the human body can intrude into almost every ecosystem, facilitating travels to any uncharted place, making an ecological imprint. But also an ethical consideration can be done. How can an embodied outfit affect the moral environment? We see this when women want to cover or uncover their hair freely, but happen to be in violation of moral laws, as sadly happened to Masha Amini, who was killed by some feminicide agents of the moral police of Iran the 16th September after being arrested and hit repeatedly on her head. The garment of the discord, the hijab, is a fine interface connecting living and death through punishment or approbation by an authority that uses extreme violence in order to perform and maintain its power to control women's bodies. From the performance artwork Presencia, Regina José Galindo wore the dresses of 13 murdered Guatemaltec women with use of violence and by unpunished men, affecting the public spaces she spent during 13 days. On the other hand, other ethical considerations, much more positive, would be understanding how much effort and creativity, skills and care are involved in the making of every single piece of clothing, and choosing to embody it as a lucid decision, which would encourage a welfare flow into and out of the clothed body and the self, into what I call the clothed self. So in an hypothetical global caring net of relations, a bodily interface should not inform the skin of abuses of any kind, because this would not be coherent with the context. Wearing would become a means to connect multiple aspects of experience, such as, for instance, linking the inner values of self-respect and the empathy with the beauty and dynamism of the living world, facilitating a sense of integrated self. Why do selves need to feel a sense of integration? We must first acknowledge that, as in the quote you see, the split between body and mind, soul, between male and female, the polarized and confrontational dualism in continuous conflict, characteristic of enlightened and capitalized, globalized modernity, may well also be the edge of the split between ethics and aesthetics. Wittgenstein states that ethics and aesthetics are the same, according to Trias. This means also assuming the multidimensional crisis of life, in words of Pérez Orozco, and its effects, including global warming and climate alterations. So the objects we wear can also inform the body about familiar or unfamiliar environments in aesthetic and ethical ways, among many other dimensions, as I said. If I buy a fast fashion t-shirt for €2 and I don't feel a sense of relatedness to the physical sphere when I wear it, I may instead, in consonance with constructed imaginary affiliations the company has assembled for me. These companies and many of the factory owners use violence, rape, and even enclosure of the factory doors in case of fire to subsume workers as a property, obligated to take care of him and his businesses or to obey every order. As it sadly happened in Karachi in 2012, where 2,060 workers died being locked in the building owned by Ali Enterprise, and international justice failed to take responsibility. Sadly, my new cheap t-shirt does not inform myself and my body of these important issues that would help to shape my own view. And I become disconnected from the actual environment the t-shirt comes from, while I stick to a fictional environment. Sadly, my new cheap, it's repeated. I become familiar to the last one and unfamiliar to the first. As a result, I become infantilized, dependent on a regular supply of cheap garments, providing a very low sense of integration of the self, and confused about how things happen. In order to become informed, I need parallel channels, what in aesthetics is called the cognitive approach. The past year, I have made many basic garments for myself and relatives out from an exchange roll of cotton and gathered natural resources and some PDF patterns. I had a radically different experience from when I bought the cheap t-shirt. Beyond cliches, wearing my self-made t-shirt affords me an extended sense of myself, in words of Bertie Neto, and a surprisingly unknown sense of welfare, which is related to many aspects. As I wear it, I am aware of the territory I inhabit. I feel grateful to the nature around me, including the walnut tree and the squirrel that sometimes jumps from a branch to gather nuts, to lavenders I planted and marigolds, and to my neighbors with whom I exchanged the fabric and the possibility of a new friendship with them. This new way to be in relation with nature near me is beyond contemplation. My self-made t-shirt affords also a connection to Lydia Higginson, who I bought the patterns, and her skills on caring teaching, and I really appreciate my own skills in garment making and the focused quality of the time this offered me when creating a handmade garment, making me feel proud. My sewing machines become beloved artifacts, which in words of Bertie Neto, shape, extend, and intensify my experiences, because Artifacts that are dear to us by virtue of the experiences they offer may be seen and felt not only as persons with whom we interact, but also as parts of our personality. My self-made clothes, according to Bertinetto, become now as people we care for and people who take care of us. They become part of our extended self in the sense that they allow us to broaden, deepen, and enhance our experiences of the world. I agree with Bertinetto, but you could argue that my cheap t-shirt also enhances my experiences in the world, as it prevents from running naked and getting burned by the sun. So, what is the difference, if there is one? This is how I tried to explain it. The relatedness the cheap t-shirt affords is split by virtual constructions, but still, we may have knowledge and information about the nature of the object of appreciation, central to its aesthetic appreciation, in Carlson's words. The object itself, this is the cheap t-shirt, is intended to inform a fiction, hiding the reality behind it. But other sources inform of an uncomfortable truth, and our experience may be affected. This is called the cognitive approach. I think I already said. Our sense of self and place may be disturbed at some level of being, and health can become subtly unbalanced as a psychosomatic phenomenon. A confusing measure of positive, ready-made virtual environments and of disturbing depictions of narrative or narratives out of our scope of realities flows through the cheap t-shirt all day long. On the contrary, there seems to be a sense of extended self exemplified in the special bodily and affective relationship, Bertinetto. Sorry. Between me and my self-made t-shirt. The aesthetic experience is not autonomous from the ethical implications, as aesthetics don't happen apart from other dimensions of experience, but rather can be understood as an experience of openness to multiple dimensions of it, according to Gerard Villard. Following this reasoning, wearing my self-made t-shirt affords an aesthetic experience of coziness, a sense of wonder on my potential skills to be less dependent on viacid fashion, while multiple internalized images related to the process, related to the process emerge all day long. All these senses make me open to a wider reflection on connectivity, the use of gathered materials, the beauty of simplicity, and the close relationship with my own body. As a consequence, my body is re-educated to a new level of dressing Epicureanism, opening my imagery to new ecological and ethical ways of positioning myself in relation with the environment. Our sad cheap t-shirt is a much more closed and elusive dispositive, and it takes extra research if we want it to unfold into ethical embodied experiences of the environmental conditions that it has the potential to inform. When it does, it may produce a revulsive reaction, or it may produce more closeness. We now understand that a caring process is a condition to achieve a caring object, which in a close all day long interaction with bodies and territories produces an expansive environmental caring effect. We are not used to it in Western fashionista societies constrained to a capital gain process that forces all forms of life into reductionist and disrupted worldviews and ethics. By hiding disturbing realities, biocid companies perpetuate the autonomy of fashion towards life and its dynamics, and we stay apart from the possibility of experiencing valuable, embodied, and situated knowledge. I wonder if it makes sense to talk of aesthetics of coherence as a bunch of practices that intend to take care, restore, reunite, heal, and integrate disconnected dimensions of life after a history of violence and degradation, acknowledging the spiritual pain and the material damage, but focusing on ethical and ecostatic productive, embodied and situated experiences able to awaken and clothe asleep or hurt dimensions of our reality on its many scales. So, to conclude, these are the conclusions in my paper. The caring person expands aesthetically her sense of self through her clothing interface, but also ethically, allowing a caring flow from the body to the environment and from the environment to the body. She acknowledges the vulnerability of living organisms and how precious life is. In a moment of perception of what a good life, or buen vivir in Spanish, is, the caring, embedded person with a rich net of relationships is the model that guides the ethics of care, while a good life, el buen vivir, is a more general concept from Avia Yala feminists, including environmental aesthetics and ethics in the scope, and the concrete experiences of openness and caring flow, reconnecting divided aspects of senses through what might be called an aesthetic experience of coherence. Clothing and the access to it is a necessary daily care essential in order to keep the conditions of possibility of life, as important as food, healthcare, education, dwelling, mobility, and energy. It's a caring interface both for bodies and environments, affording the possibility of a good life in the biosphere to ecosystems with all its organisms within. But this is conditioned to the model of moral person focused on enriching her relatedness and sense of belonging, and who seeks her autonomy on the possibility to decide by herself who to take care for without subjugation, instead of the individualistic self-interested persons and corporations only oriented towards capital gain. So if we start considering clothing as a necessary object for life, as an input of materials that our bodies need in order to perform their everyday lives and to achieve our vital expansion, biased fashion with its dynamics and assumptions becomes less indispensable. Dressing, therefore, is much more than an innocent and casual everyday action. It's an action that shapes our cognition and the world we live in. A bunch of possibilities opens up for escaping hegemonic conceptions of the clothed body. We then can see apparel as objects with the agency to produce healthy or unhealthy relationships from a complex range of experience that involves ecology, aesthetics, ethics, health, embedded worldview, and ourselves actively experimenting with all of it, beside the dictatorship of markets that have kidnapped our autonomy or sovereignty to decide what kind of interfaces we wish to clothe our bodies with in order to live a good life. Thank you.